The rain washed the blood down Amina's hands in warm, sticky rivers. She was kneeling in a dark alley, the wet pavement soaking through her jeans, trying to catch her breath as she looked at the man she'd just bandaged up. He wasn't some innocent victim. Jiho slouched against the brick wall, his expensive suit completely trashed, his face a mess of bruises and cuts. But his eyes were open, and there was nothing grateful in them. Just this emptiness, like looking into something cold and dead. Black holes that made promises you didn't want to hear. His hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. Hard. Steel trap hard. He yanked her down until their faces were almost touching, close enough that she could feel his breath. He didn't thank her. You made a mistake, Jiho said, voice like distant thunder rolling in. You saw my face. She tried to pull back. He wouldn't let go. That's when it hit her. She hadn't saved anyone tonight. She'd gotten in the way of something dangerous. And now whatever he was, whatever violence lived behind those dead eyes, it was focused entirely on her. Welcome to Afro-Co Obsession, the story of Amina and Jiho. It's about what happens when doing the right thing goes horribly wrong. When a good deed doesn't earn you gratitude, but drags a monster straight into your life. And this monster? He doesn't want you dead. He wants to own you. The water was so hot it hurt. Amina kept her hands under the stream anyway. She wanted the heat, needed it, actually. Anything to replace the feeling of cold rain and warm blood that wouldn't leave her alone. Steam crept across the bathroom mirror until her reflection disappeared completely. Good. She didn't want to see her own eyes right now, didn't want to see the fear still sitting there. She grabbed the nail brush and went at her cuticles until the skin turned raw. That smell from the alley, metallic, wrong. It felt like it had soaked into her somehow. Her fancy floral hand soap wasn't doing a damn thing about it. When she finally shut off the faucet, the quiet hit her all at once. Her apartment was always quiet, but not like this. This was the kind of silence that felt like waiting. She dried her hands on a white towel and held them up to the light. Clean, at least on the surface. She was a marketing consultant, for God's sake. She built brands. She analyzed data. She solved problems in conference rooms with whiteboards and bad coffee. She didn't patch up criminals in alleys. She didn't kneel in the mud for men who looked at her like prey. It was a one-time thing. A freak accident. She repeated this to herself as she walked to her bedroom. She locked the door. Checked it. Checked it again. Morning came with an almost insulting normalcy. Bright sun. Dry streets. Last night already starting to feel unreal, like something she'd dreamed up during a fever. Amina put on her work uniform. Sharp navy blazer, tailored pants, hair pulled back tight. Professional. Untouchable. Coffee tumbler in hand. She walked to the office. The morning commute swallowed her up. Noise, movement, the comfortable anonymity of being one person among thousands. Just another face. Then she saw the car. Black sedan. Parked right in front of her building. Not a taxi, not an Uber. This was expensive, heavy, the kind of car that meant something. The windows were tinted so dark they looked wet. The engine was running, just sitting there, purring. Amina's step stuttered. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She gripped her bag and looked around. Nobody else seemed to notice. People walked right past it like it was invisible. Keep moving, she told herself. It's just a car. Her firm had high-end clients all the time. This had nothing to do with her. She walked past without looking at the windows. Refused to give it that power. Made it through the revolving doors and finally breathed. By noon, she had a splitting headache. She needed real coffee, not the office sludge. The little cafe around the corner was safe, smelled like roasted beans and vanilla, felt like neutral territory. She stood in line scrolling through emails, trying to stay tethered to normal. One caramel macchiato, she told the barista, already reaching for her wallet. He shook his head, wiping his hands on his apron with this confused little smile. You're all set. Already paid for. Her hand froze. What? I didn't. The guy, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the back. Came in a few minutes ago. Pointed you out when you walked in. Said to put whatever you ordered on his tab. Ice water down her spine. She turned, expecting a coworker. A client. Someone she knew. Which guy? Her voice came out thin. That one. Corner booth. The booth was empty. Just a cup of black coffee sitting there, still steaming. The chair pushed back slightly, like someone had just gotten up. No one there, but the air felt thick with it. He'd been there. He'd watched her come in. He'd paid for her drink. And then he'd disappeared. Amina stared at that empty seat. The coffee shop didn't feel safe anymore. The glass walls felt like being on display. She wasn't anonymous. She was known. The blood might have washed off her hands, but whatever had started last night was just beginning. The email showed up Tuesday morning at 8. Payment confirmation, 12 months. Amina just stared at it. Her lease wasn't even close to being up. She grabbed her phone and called the landlord right away. He sounded weird, jumpy, almost. Said someone wired enough to cover her rent for the whole next year, plus a deposit on some penthouse she'd never heard of. Wouldn't tell her who. Then he hung up before she could say anything else. She sat there in her cubicle with the phone still pressed to her ear, feeling sick. This wasn't generosity. It was something else entirely. Then Greg disappeared. Greg, the senior associate who always stood too close and found excuses to touch her shoulder. He just vanished. His desk wasn't just empty, it was erased. No dog photos, no coffee mug, none of his usual mess of paperwork. HR acted like he'd never existed. When Amina asked the receptionist about him, the woman went pale and changed the subject. He hadn't quit. He'd just gone. None of this felt like help. It felt like control. Every bill that got paid, every problem that disappeared, every path that suddenly cleared, it all felt like walls closing in. Like she couldn't breathe without permission. She was a marionette, and whoever was pulling the strings had been doing it since that night in the alley. She left work as the sun was setting. The air had that heavy feeling it gets before a storm. The black sedan was parked at the curb, waiting. Engine running, smooth and quiet. This time she didn't keep walking. The fear twisted into something harder, anger. She walked straight over and slammed her hand against the tinted window. Stop following me. The window came down without a sound. She'd been expecting to see him. The man from the alley, Jiho, with that ruined face. It was someone else. The driver looked maybe 30. Close-cropped hair, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Same expensive suit as his boss, but he wore it differently, like a uniform. His eyes weren't like Jiho's, empty and bottomless. These were just blank. Professional. He was doing a job. Ms. Muzanda. Not a question. The boss insists. It's going to rain. The passenger door unlocked with a click that felt too loud. I'm taking the subway, Amina said. Her voice shook, but she didn't move. The subway isn't safe, he said, not even blinking. Get in. Tell him to leave me alone. I don't want his money. I don't want any of this. It's not about what you want, the man said, his tone completely flat. It's policy. Amina stepped back. He didn't try to stop her, didn't raise his voice. She turned and started walking, eyes straight ahead, moving fast. Then she heard it. Tires rolling slowly over loose gravel. The sedan didn't drive off. It just followed, kept pace with her perfectly. When she sped up, it sped up. When she slowed down, it slowed down. People on the street noticed. They looked at the car, looked at her, and saw exactly what was happening. Then they looked away. Whatever the car carried with it, some invisible weight, it made them want to be anywhere else. Amina's hands were shaking so hard, she had to grip her purse with both of them. And that's when it really hit her. She hadn't done a good deed that night. She hadn't saved someone. She'd let something in, and now it wouldn't leave. This wasn't protection. It was a hunt, and she was the one being corralled. The lock didn't click. It just turned in her hand, already unlocked. Amina stood there in the hallway, heart slamming so hard she could barely breathe. She knew she'd locked it. She always did. The door groaned as it swung inward, showing just a sliver of her living room, mostly dark. She didn't call out. Everything in her was screaming to run, to get back in that elevator and never look back, but she couldn't move. She pushed the door all the way open. Inside, it was pitch black except for a thin stripe of moonlight coming through the blinds. It lit up someone sitting in her favorite chair. Jiho looked different now. The blood was gone. The bruises had faded to yellowish smudges on his cheekbones. He was wearing a fresh suit, charcoal gray, perfectly fitted. It made him look less like someone who'd just been in a street fight and more like he owned the place. He had a glass of her wine in his hand, the cheap red she'd grabbed on sale last week. He swirled it slowly, staring into it like he was reading tea leaves or something. Didn't even glance up when she walked in. Just took a sip and made a face. You have terrible taste in wine, he said. His voice was quiet, but it seemed to fill the whole room. Amina's keys hit the floor. The crash made her jump. Get out. Jiho set the glass down on her side table. Slow. Deliberate. Like he had all the time in the world. I can't do that. I saved your life, she said, and hated how shaky her voice sounded. And you break into my apartment? You interfered. He finally looked at her. His eyes were empty, not angry, not grateful, just cold. That wasn't some random fight, Amina. It was supposed to be an execution. When you pulled me out of there, you put yourself on the radar. My enemies saw you. They know your face. They know your name. The room felt airless. She pressed her back against the door, needing something solid. What are you talking about? I'm saying you're a problem now. He stood up. The apartment felt smaller. He was tall, broad, and just there in a way that made it hard to think straight. He walked toward her, unhurried, like gravity pulling downhill. You're not safe on your own anymore, he said, getting closer. They'll come after you to get to me. Use you as bait. I'm not letting that happen. I don't want your help, she said. Wasn't asking. He stopped right in front of her. She could smell his cologne mixed with something sharper, something that smelled like trouble. He put his hand on the door next to her head, blocking her in. Leaned down until his face was inches from hers. She could see little flecks of gold in his dark eyes. You're part of this now, he said quietly. I'm not here to ask permission, Amina. I'm here because you're coming with me. What would you do if a mafia boss sat in your living room claiming he owns your safety? Tell me in the comments if you'd run or stay. And if you're enjoying the suspense, hit that like button to help us grow. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended 40 stories above the city. It offered a panoramic view of the skyline, a breathtaking expanse of lights and movement that Amina could only look at, never touch. The apartment was colder than the alleyway had been. It smelled of ozone and expensive leather, stripped of any human warmth. Amina tried to work. She set up her laptop on the dining table, a slab of black marble that felt like a tombstone. She joined a video conference for a branding strategy session. She smiled at her camera. She nodded at the right times. But every time she looked up, she saw them. Two men in dark suits stood by the front door. They were silent. They were motionless. They were jailers dressed as chauffeurs. She muted her microphone. Do you have to stand there? She hissed. They did not answer. They did not even blink. Amina slammed her laptop shut. The illusion of normalcy shattered. She was not a consultant anymore. She was a bird in a gilded cage. When Jiho arrived that evening, the air in the room shifted. He did not knock. He entered with the entitlement of ownership. He placed a key card on the console table. You look restless, he observed. He removed his suit jacket, folding it meticulously over the back of a chair. I am a prisoner, Amina snapped. She stood on the other side of the room, putting the marble table between them as a barrier. You moved me here. You cut me off. You have people watching me sleep. Who are you, Jiho? You play this role of a businessman, but you act like a warlord. Jiho paused. He adjusted his cufflinks. I am a businessman. My business just happens to require strict risk management. Show me, she challenged. If I am part of this life now, show me what it actually is. Stop hiding behind suits and silence. He studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. Get your coat. They drove in silence to a private lounge in the heart of the district. It was not a place listed on maps. The sign outside was a simple, unlit geometric shape. Inside, the lighting was low, the music a deep, thrumming bass that rattled the ribcage. Jiho led her to a semi-private booth. A man was already waiting there. He was sweating, despite the cool air. He looked at Jiho with the eyes of a cornered animal. Sit, Jiho commanded. Amina sat. Jiho took the seat opposite the sweating man. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply placed his hand on the table, palm up. The man hesitated, then placed his trembling hand in Jiho's. You borrowed against the energetic projected earnings, Jiho said softly. The earnings did not materialize. Please, sir, the man stammered. I just need a week. 1 week. Jiho's grip tightened. He did not look at the man's hand. He turned his head slowly, locking eyes with Amina. Watch, he said. He applied pressure. It was a slow, mechanical motion. The man whimpered, trying to pull away, but Jiho's arm was iron. Amina wanted to look away. She wanted to close her eyes. But Jiho's gaze held her captive. He was staring right into her soul, his face completely void of anger, pleasure, or hesitation. He looked bored. Snap! The sound was wet and sharp, like a dry branch breaking. The man screamed, collapsing forward onto the table. Jiho did not react. His heart rate did not seem to rise. His pupils did not dilate. He kept his eyes fixed on Amina, displaying the terrifying emptiness behind them. He broke a human being's bone with the same casual indifference as opening a letter. "I am not a warlord," Jiho said, his voice steady over the man's sobbing. "I am simply necessary. Do you understand now?" Amina could not breathe. She realized then that there was no man behind the monster. The monster was all there was. That sound, her fingers snapping, wouldn't leave Amina alone. It kept playing over and over in her head, that awful crunch buried underneath the normal sounds of the city outside. She had to get out. The penthouse wasn't protection anymore. It was just a fancy jail cell. 2 days went by before she saw her chance. The guards switched shifts at the elevator, and for maybe 3 minutes, nobody was watching. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might burst right out of her chest as she slipped through the service exit, practically gasping for air. 3 blocks down, she threw her phone in a public garbage can. Then she ducked into a corner store and bought a burner with the cash she'd hidden in her sock. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she punched in the only number she knew by heart. Sarah. They'd been roommates in college. She was the one person who had nothing to do with any of this mess. The one person Jiho shouldn't even know existed. "Amina? Oh my God, is that you? Where the hell have you been?" Sarah sounded so worried it almost broke her. "I can't get into it right now. Can you meet me at Union Station? North entrance. And bring whatever cash you have. Please, Sarah." Yeah, of course. "Are you okay? Are you hurt? Just please hurry." Amina ended the call and snapped the SIM card in half. She yanked her hood down over her face and melted into the crowd, making her way to Union Station. The place was massive and loud, packed with people rushing everywhere. It reeked of diesel fuel and burnt coffee. She walked up to the ticket counter and bought passage to some tiny coastal town she'd never heard of, furthest destination they had. 6 hours away. She waited by the north entrance, watching everyone who passed. Every tall guy in a suit made her jump. Every shadow looked like it could be him. 10 minutes turned into 20. The departure board kept clicking and flipping, updating itself. Sarah still hadn't shown. Amina glanced up at the station clock. Her stomach dropped. Something was wrong. She looked over at the huge digital screen hanging above the main floor. Usually it just showed ads and weather reports. The screen started glitching. The sunny vacation commercial cut to static, the image breaking apart and reforming into something grainy and colorless. Amina's heart stopped. She was looking at a room. Concrete walls. A single bulb swinging from a wire. And sitting there in the middle of it all, tied to a metal chair, was Sarah. Duct tape across her mouth. Eyes huge with the same terror Amina felt crawling up her own spine. People around the station started noticing. There were gasps, murmurs. Some pulled out their phones to film it. The burner in Amina's pocket started buzzing. The vibration shot through her like electricity. She pulled it out and answered but couldn't make herself say anything. "I told you." Jiho's voice was so calm it made her skin crawl. Almost friendly. "You're not safe on your own. And neither is anyone you care about. Please let her go," Amina whispered. Her eyes were burning. "She didn't do anything. She doesn't know anything. She knows you," Jiho said. "That's enough. Now turn around, Amina." Amina turned. There he was, standing at the top of the big staircase, looking down at the chaos below. He wasn't even trying to hide. 2 of his guys stood on either side of him. He was looking right at her with this disappointed expression, like she was a kid who'd broken some rule. He had his phone pressed to his ear, staring directly into her eyes from across the entire station. "Come back," he said simply, "and I'll let her go. Keep running, and everyone keeps watching." Amina looked back up at the screen. Sarah was fighting against the ropes, panicking. This wasn't a recording. This was happening right now. She looked toward the exit. She could still make it. The train was boarding. 50 feet, and she'd be gone. But Sarah would die. Amina's hand fell to her side. She watched her ticket drift down to the grimy floor. "I'm coming," she said into the phone. She started walking toward the stairs. Toward him. And every single step felt like the walls closing in. The car ride back was suffocating. Amina kept her body pressed against the door, watching the city lights streak past in a blur. Everything inside her felt scraped raw. Once they were inside the apartment, Jiho waved his men away. The door shut with a heavy click. They were alone. Amina waited for him to explode. She'd seen the look on his face at the station, that cold, terrifying emptiness. She was ready for shouting, threats, something. Instead, he went to a cabinet and pulled out a first aid kit. "Sit down," he said, not barking orders this time. Just asking. She didn't know what to make of that. Her legs were shaking anyway, so she lowered herself onto the sofa. Then he knelt in front of her. That threw her completely. This man who towered over everyone, who commanded rooms with a glance, on his knees. He took her hand before she could pull away, turning it over to examine her scraped palm from when she'd fallen running for the train. "Why are you doing this?" The question came out barely above a whisper. He didn't look up, just opened an antiseptic wipe and started cleaning the wound. It stung like hell. She jerked back reflexively, but his grip kept her steady. "You think I'm angry that you ran?" His voice was quiet, measured. "I'm not. I'm disappointed in myself. Should have known what a cornered animal would do." Heat flashed through her chest. "I'm not an animal. I'm a person, and you're a monster." He lifted his eyes to hers. They were so dark they seemed bottomless. "I know." He went back to wrapping her hand, his movements careful, almost tender. "Most people feel things," he said. "Fear, guilt. They get stuck worrying about consequences. I don't have that problem. I see what I want, I go get it. Whatever's in the way gets moved. It's efficient." He finished the bandage but didn't let go of her hand. Just sat there on his heels, his thumb running slowly across her knuckles. "But you." His voice dropped lower. "You don't make sense. You pulled me out of that car when any rational person would have kept walking. You ran when you were objectively safer here. I can't predict you, Amina." Her pulse hammered in her throat. "Is that it then? I'm just some puzzle you're trying to solve." "No." His gaze flicked to her mouth, then back up. The heat in his eyes made her breath catch. "It's because you're mine." The words settled over her like a weight. Not love, nothing so simple. Possession, the way a dragon might claim treasure. But underneath that cold certainty, she caught a glimpse of something else. Something raw and hungry and almost desperate. That scared her more than anything he'd done so far. He leaned closer. The space between them shrank to nothing. She could smell his cologne, feel the warmth coming off him. There was a thin scar along his jaw she'd never noticed before. His breath ghosted across her skin. For one impossible second, she thought he was going to kiss her. And the worst part? Some traitorous corner of her mind wanted him to. Wanted to know what it would feel like to let that darkness swallow her whole. He pulled back. The movement was sudden, almost violent. He stood and turned away, dragging a hand through his hair. Whatever crack she'd seen in his armor sealed itself shut instantly, but his shoulders stayed rigid. "Get some sleep." His voice came out rough, strained. "We'll figure things out tomorrow." He left without another word. Amina sat there in the silent apartment, her hand still tingling where he'd touched it. The realization crept over her slowly, like ice water in her veins. She wasn't just afraid of him anymore. She was afraid of herself. Do you think Jiho is capable of love, or is this just obsession? Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss how this twists in the next chapter. Amina showed up to work the next morning, but she wasn't really there. She could still feel Jiho's hands on her skin, like a brand that wouldn't fade. Everything in the office seemed wrong somehow, too quiet, too normal. She stared at her computer screen, pretending to work on spreadsheets, but the numbers wouldn't stick. Her mind kept circling back to her colleague who'd disappeared without explanation. The landline rang. She actually jumped. Nobody used the desk phones anymore. "Ms. Muzonda?" The voice sounded wrong. Processed through something. "We know who keeps you." Her stomach dropped. "Who is this?" "Tell the dragon his pet is in the snake pit." Click. Before she could even process what she'd heard, the fire alarm went off. Not the normal beep 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 of the monthly drills. This was constant, ear-splitting, wrong. People started flooding out of their cubicles. The confusion spread fast, turning into something uglier. "Everyone out. Move." The security guard's voice cracked as he ran past. His face had gone sheet white. "Bomb threat. This is real." Amina got caught in the crush of bodies heading for the stairs. But when they reached the stairwell, the doors wouldn't budge. Someone had triggered the magnetic locks. The crowd pressed in tighter. People started hammering on the metal doors, their voices climbing higher. The explosion hit before anyone could think. It came from somewhere else in the building, but the floor bucked under Amina's feet. She went down hard. Ceiling tiles cracked and rained dust. The lights cut out, leaving only the seizure strobe of emergency lighting. People were screaming in the dark. Amina scrambled under the nearest desk on her hands and knees, choking on smoke. She pulled herself into a ball and shook. This was it. She was actually going to die here. She lost track of time after that. The screaming eventually dulled to a ringing in her ears. Then she heard footsteps. Not panicked running. Something measured. Deliberate. Heavy boots on debris. A figure filled the doorway, backlit by emergency lights. Too big. Amina. The way he said her name, it wasn't a question. She looked out from under the desk. Jiho stood in the middle of the destroyed office like he belonged there. His suit was wrecked, covered in gray dust. Blood ran down from a gash on his forehead, leaving clean tracks through the ash on his face. He had a gun in his right hand, hanging loose at his side like it was part of him. The hallway behind him was empty. No first responders. No help coming. Just him. He turned slowly, scanning the room. When his eyes caught the emergency lights, something in them looked off. Feral. Amina. His voice cracked the air, raw with something that sounded almost like fear. Here, she managed. He moved fast. The desk flew aside like it weighed nothing. Then he was on his knees in front of her, not caring about the broken glass cutting through his pants. He grabbed her face with both hands, too hard, it would bruise, and searched her face like he was looking for proof she was real. They touched you. Not a question. A death sentence for someone. Jiho. She grabbed his wrists, her vision blurring. Look at me. His voice dropped low, absolute. You're alive because I won't let you die. Nobody takes you. Not them. Not anyone. He pulled her against his chest. He smelled like destruction, smoke and blood, and that cologne he always wore. Holding on to him felt like clinging to a cliff face in an earthquake. Terrifying, but solid. Can you walk? She nodded into his shoulder. Good. He stood, bringing her up with him. The gun disappeared somewhere in his jacket. He took her hand. Don't look back. I'm going to end every single one of them. He walked her through the smoke and wreckage like he owned it. And Amina realized something had shifted in her. She didn't want to run anymore. She wanted to watch him tear them apart. The drive was a blur of neon lights and terrifying speed. Jiho did not take her to a hospital or a safe house. He drove straight to the industrial district, to a nondescript shipping yard where the Vipers had coordinated the attack. He dragged Amina out of the car, his grip iron-tight on her hand. He would not let her go. Not for a second. Stay behind me, he ordered. He kicked open the metal door of the office trailer. Inside, 4 men scrambled for weapons. They were too slow. Jiho moved like smoke. 2 shots rang out, deafening in the small space. 2 men dropped. He didn't pause. He stepped over the bodies, disarming the 3rd man with a sickening crack of bone before throwing him through the glass partition. Amina pressed her hands over her ears, curling into the corner. This was not a fight. It was a slaughter. Jiho was a machine of destruction, efficient and cold. He didn't shout. He didn't taunt. He simply erased them. The leader of the cell, the man who had called her phone, crawled backward across the dirty floor. Blood streamed from his nose. He held up a hand in a pathetic gesture of surrender. Wait. It was just a job. We didn't know she was yours, the man screamed. Jiho loomed over him. He looked like a reaper. The dust from the explosion still coated his suit, now speckled with fresh crimson. He raised his gun, aiming directly between the man's eyes. His finger tightened on the trigger. There was no hesitation in his posture, no flicker of mercy. Jiho, stop. The scream tore from Amina's throat. It was raw, desperate, and terrified. The silence that followed was absolute. Jiho froze. The gun remained leveled at the man's head. His finger hovered millimeters from the break point. For a long, agonizing second, nothing moved. The man on the floor whimpered. Then, slowly, Jiho turned his head. He looked at Amina. He saw the horror in her eyes. He saw the way she trembled, not because of the men he had killed, but because of what he was becoming in front of her. The darkness in his gaze swirled, a storm contained within a man. He looked back at the target, then down at his weapon. A muscle feathered in his jaw. He lowered the gun. He stepped back, leaving the man sobbing on the floor. He walked over to Amina, holstering the weapon with a smooth click. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, then pulling back when he saw her recoil. "We are leaving," he said, his voice void of the rage that had just consumed the room. He had spared the man, not because of mercy, but because she asked. The monster had teeth, but for the first time, Amina realized she held the chain. The engine rumbled quietly at the curb outside International Departures. Rain ran down the windows, turning the airport lights into fuzzy smears. Inside the car, neither of them spoke. Jiho pulled a thick envelope from his jacket and set it on the console between them. He kept his eyes straight ahead, staring at the rain-soaked windshield. "New identity," he said flatly. "Bank account in Zurich. First-class ticket. 2 hours. The Vipers are done. You're free." Amina looked at the envelope. This was it. Everything she'd wanted since that night in the alley. A normal life. Safety. No more broken fingers at dinner tables or walking into fires. "You're really letting me go?" Jiho's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm not good for you, Amina. I destroy things. It's what I do. Eventually, I destroy you too." He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her chest ache. "Go, before I can't let you." She picked up the envelope with shaking hands, opened the door, and stepped into the cold rain. The terminal doors slid open as she approached. Warm air rushed out. She walked inside. Everything was bright and loud. Families saying goodbye. Business people rushing to gates. Tourists laughing over coffee. Normal. Safe. Ordinary. And completely lifeless. Amina stared at the ticket. This was her escape. A one-way trip to a safe, predictable existence. But no one in that world would ever look at her the way Jiho did. Like she was the only thing that mattered. She thought about the fear, the chaos, the way he'd protect her from anything. Safety felt suffocating. She stopped walking. People moved around her, annoyed. She took a breath, and it felt stale. She didn't want this. She didn't want empty and safe. She turned around. Through the glass doors, the black car was still there. He hadn't left. He was waiting, watching her walk away so he could disappear back into whatever dark corner he came from. Amina pushed back through the doors into the rain, past confused travelers hauling luggage, right up to the passenger side. She knocked on the window. She made her choice, but was it the right one? Share this video with a friend who loves dark romance. The car door clicked open with a solid thunk, and Amina ducked back inside, out of the rain. Water drummed against the roof, wrapping them in their own little world. Jiho stared at her like he'd just watched someone throw away a winning lottery ticket. She didn't explain herself, just ripped the plane ticket down the middle and dropped both halves onto the console between them. So what gives? Why would someone like Amina, smart, put together, successful, walk back toward danger instead of running from it? Let's pull back from the rain and the tension for a second and talk about what's actually happening here. This is a textbook case of what psychologists call hybristophilia, sometimes known as Bonnie and Clyde syndrome. It's when someone's attracted to people who've done dangerous or criminal things. Fiction loves this setup because it feeds into a specific fantasy, that your love could be the thing that changes someone, that you're special enough to calm the storm. Jiho isn't appealing because he's kind. He's appealing because he's dangerous, but only seems to soften for her. That exclusivity? It hits hard. But there's something else going on beneath the surface, something called trauma bonding. It happens when someone gets emotionally attached to the person who's hurting them, usually through a cycle of fear and relief. Jiho creates the danger, his enemies, his world, his choices, and then swoops in to save her from it. Every time that happens, her brain gets flooded with feel-good chemicals. It becomes a loop, an addiction, almost, to the person causing the problem in the first place. In the story, we frame Jiho's behavior as intense devotion. He tracks her location. He cuts her off from other people. He uses fear to keep her near him. We call it protective. But if we're being honest, in the real world, that's not love. That's control. When someone tells you, "You're not safe without me," they're not keeping you safe. They're making sure you can't leave. Amina going back to that car is the emotional peak of a fantasy. The thrill wins. But outside the pages or the screen, Real safety doesn't come from someone who hurts people over dinner. It comes from respect, from having your own space, from knowing you can walk away and no one's going to stop you. We're drawn to these stories because they let us flirt with danger without actually being in it. We get the rush, the passion, the drama, all from a safe distance. And that's fine. Jiho works as a character. But just remember, a good relationship shouldn't ever feel like you're being held captive.